Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The transition actually worked perfectly then. Nice. So, welcome all to this NRL tips and predictions live edition for round 24. Obviously, we're getting to the business end of the season. It's arguably the best time for rugby league minus the finals, but it's going to be an exciting bit of footy nonetheless. Lots of matches that can be very consequential this round. So I guess we can just sort of jump into it. We're going to change it to this lookout. Yep, there we go. So without further ado, get into the opening round. So, of course, the opening match of the round, I should say. The Manly Sea Eagles up against the Penrith Panthers. So, what can be said about these two teams? So Manly obviously played the last week's opening game against the Sydney Roosters in a game where they pretty much needed to win to stay on at the same pace as the Newcastle Knights, but unfortunately just ended up suffering a fairly synonymous battering. To be fair, they did started making a little bit of a comeback roughly near the end of the match, but that was purely because Dylan Brown got a straight send-off. It was Nathan Brown, sorry, they got the straight send-off. But obviously, in terms of going to scroll down for the ins and outs, few of the younger players for both teams coming into this. So you got Ben Condon, Chan Kum Tong, Ko Weeks, Morgan Harper, and Sean Kepi in for Manly. But obviously, an interesting situation developing with Matthew Lodge. It's not really interesting. He did his ACL. Basically, that has ruled him out for the rest of the season, unfortunately, there for Manly. So, in the ends for Penrith, you've got Jack Cole, Jack Cogger, Liam Henry, and Tom Jenkins, who are mostly going to be into the reserves. Mostly, I feel like I highly doubt any of them would be ending up playing in this match. So, if we quickly just have a look and go into the ladder. So obviously Penrith are at the top of the table, so we don't need to look about them. Manly we need to look at. So a win here for Manly, bearing in mind they are paying $8 to win this match. If Manly get the win, they will jump all the way to 27 points, meaning they will be 8th place because the Knights have got a better for and against them. However, they're going to get knocked down by the North Queensland Cowboys because they've got a bye, so they'll jump up to 28. So the best case scenario is the Manly Sea Eagles will finish 9th, but that has to rely on South Sydney, Parramatta not winning, which I feel like you could make a case very much so for the Dragons Parramatta game, but for the Rabbitohs and Dragons, who knows? But it's a sort of situation where Manly have to have everything for them in their favour to actually, make the 8 at this point. Still very much can do it, but it's going to be very tight, very close. I feel like this game, I mean, let's be completely honest. The as much as we want, people say we want Penrith, like cop a loss. I mean, with the way Penrith are playing, it's just not going to happen. I personally think that the Penrith Panthers should take the win against Manly. So in terms of the poll, we actually did have one vote coming in and saying they've gone in favour of Manly to take the win, which is, good to see. But this is pretty much Manly would have to, like a bunch of teams, pretty much win every single match for them to take this, to try to take the 8 at this point. So now we're going to look into the Cronulla Sharks and the Gold Coast Titans. So we can whop this in. Get that. No transition into there. Nothing to say. Okay, so the Cronulla Sharks and the Gold Coast Titans. So Cronulla Sharks in a game where they needed to stop this sort of fall from grace, if you wanted to call it, they saved it. They purely did, and they were able to get the win over South Sydney, over in Perth. Like, that is probably the most important win they could have probably had going into this final round of matches. Gold Coast Titans were in a very questionable game against the New Zealand Warriors where refereeing wasn't really the best for either side. But the Titans did have a few players out, and they've still been pretty competitive, to say the very least. But looking into the ins and outs for the Sharks and the Titans, as Mulatalo has been added back into the squad, and he is expected to start. But interesting development, obviously. Mawika Fodawaker out because of his suspension. Sam Verrills has actually just been ruled out with an ACL, meaning he's out now for the rest of the season. But two massive additions, three actually, coming back in for the Titans: Jamin Jolliffe, Cruz Leeming, and Tino Fasul Malawi. So the Gold Coast Titans are getting some of their big players back. So it's going to be a good thing to see, and depending on how the Titans go this, I feel like this is a game that can go either way. But personally, I feel like I have to go with the Sharks in this. So I should actually have just realized what I should have. I should actually have like a separate. I'm going to set this up. But yeah, I do think the Sharks should take the win. It might be a lot closer, but it's just one of those who knows what actually occurs. So now we move on to the final game on Friday, and this is another big game concerning one of the teams trying to get into the top 8 in the Parramatta Eels. As we can just scroll in, as they go up to the Gabba to play Brisbane. Obviously, the Brisbane Broncos are able to get the win over their North Queensland rivals, who pretty much have stopped the Cowboys' month or so long streak of winning. But Parramatta having to come back from behind, doing it the hard way, as they had to take on the St. George Illawarra Dragons in a game where there is admittedly been controversy, basically in discussion about a certain try that wasn't given to the Dragons, which the NRL have admitted that, yes, it is a try. So that it was a try, but, it's just Parramatta kind of been being bailed out, which has kind of been like the story for the last couple of weeks. But going into the team lineup, so Jesse Arthurs is out for the Broncos. Miller Stephenson has been dropped for the Parramatta team. Aaron Reynolds is back. Jordan Pereira, Kobe Hetherington, Tristan Taylor. So you're getting some players back. Waka Blake and Dejan Arce and Otahiki Ogden coming back into the squad for Parramatta. It's going to be hard to say what I think should go down, but I think it's going to be, to be completely honest, I do believe that Brisbane should win this. Don't think it's very controversial to say. Brisbane playing really good footy, but if Parramatta do get the win, that would put them into the top 8, obviously depending on other results or whether or not they stay in it. So now we can move on to the first game on Saturday. We have the Charity Shield type rematch sort of thingy, as you have the South Sydney Rabbitohs taking on the St. George Illawarra Dragons all the way up the top end in Cairns. So South Sydney obviously having a very shaky performance against Cronulla, to the point where Cronulla were just too good from on the day. Dragons showing kind of like in the last couple of weeks that they've been able to take it to, higher opposition. They took it to Manly and they took it to Parramatta. Just unfortunately, they weren't able to get the win there. So I don't know. It's a fairly hard one but I do feel like South Sydney should be able to get the win on paper. But the problem is, though, on paper hasn't really been a good key insight. So in terms of outs for the Dragons, got Francis Molo, Jack Bird, and Zach Lomax, all three out, which is going to be crucial for the Dragons. Thomas Burgess is out for a symbol, and so is Chi Cam. Got players like Jacob Host coming back into the squad, Saluka Fafita and Shaquai Mitchell. For the Dragons, also got Moisa Sully coming in as well for them. So, I feel like Lomax is going to be a fairly sizable miss there. And I've probably got to say, I believe South Sydney should take the win, and it should be a little bit further out than it really should, but there we go. Now we're going to move into West Tigers and the New Zealand Warriors. So the West Tigers last week, very close. Again, they're kind of like the Dragons in a way. They've been able to take it to these higher-end teams, but just haven't been able to actually go over and get wins. And it looks like it's going to be another struggle for them as they're going to take on the New Zealand Warriors who are on red-hot form. They're playing in New Zealand again because this is one of the only instances where the home team have given their game for the Warriors because of how much the Warriors had to suffer throughout the COVID years. So, it's with the Warriors, they've got probably one of the easy. I won't say it's easy, but they've got like one of the most in favor run homes again to probably get further up the field as possible. Potentially, if some teams drop points, they could probably charge for second to have a home qualifying final, which would be nuts. But in terms of like this game, like what the Warriors should kill them, unfortunately to say, for any Tigers fans. But yeah, the Warriors should absolutely dominate this game. But they've shown how they've been putting them stuff up. So who knows? Now we move on to another game as well, but this time in terms of the Saturday games, this does have a fair amount of stakes for both teams as it's the Sydney Roosters up against the Redcliffe Dolphins. So pretty much Roosters are in 12th, Dolphins are in 14th. I think you can kind of make some form of a case of it being over for the Dolphins. I think they kind of needed to get that win against the Knights last week. But obviously the Roosters able to get the win on Thursday against the Manly Sea Eagles, which is still keeping their season alive. Only out in this game is obviously Nathan Brown for his send-off. But you are getting some play. Ray Stone's back in the squad for the Dolphins. And Dylan Napa is in the squad for the Sydney Roosters. I'll just go in here if I could probably see it. Dylan Napa, the first time he's playing for the Roosters since the 2018 grand final when they beat Melbourne. So, be interesting to say. I do think this can actually be a very close game. It's a season on the line for the Roosters. And I think the Roosters should be able to get the win. I think it might be fairly close, but maybe like 1-12. But I do believe that the Sydney Roosters should be able to take the win against the Dolphins, which basically will probably be the final nail in the coffin for the Dolphins to actually get the title. Charge or like making the top 8. Now we're going into the final two games as we have the Melbourne Storm and the Canberra Raiders. It is, I believe, 4th versus 5th, or it's 3rd versus 5th, something along those lines. 4th versus 5th. Massive game in terms of the context of who is going to have the second chance, who even has a home final as well, because this does kind of help Canterbury because they would have the home team advantage in the elimination final if they are in it. But yeah, the Melbourne Storm got kind of wiped out there by Penrith, and the Raiders just about scraping over a win against the Tigers. In terms of out, Sebastian Chris is out for Canberra. George Jennings is out for Melbourne. So in terms of some of the ins, you've got Xavier Coates back, Tarek Sims, Reema Smith, Jerome Hughes, and Al McDonald. Some solid stohorts there for the Storm team. And you got Ethan Strange and a bunch of other players being back in for the Canberra squad. I personally think the Storm have just got the strongest squad. It's going to be at home. I think the Storm should be able to clinch the win. Will be close, but I think the Storm should do enough. And finally, the big match. It is the Newcastle Knights. Not a big match in terms of for a personal sake. It's the Newcastle Knights up against the Canterbury Bulldogs. So the Knights are still on their winning streak. They are 5 in a row after a very ugly, ugly match against the Redcliffe Dolphins. And the Bulldogs are coming off a bye, actually. So their squad's actually going to be pretty fit, and they're going to be raring to go for this. Obviously, the Bulldogs can't make the 8, but, finish the season out on the high, and then Mad Monday. So, it's good motivators nonetheless. So in terms of so you got Hayes Perham, Jaden Ockenbaugh coming back into the squad. Bradman Best is out for the Knights, and Anari Tawala will be starting in the centre. You got Daniel Sofidi, Heimel Hunt, Jack Johns, and Simi Sasagi. And it's hard to say because the buys haven't really... There are some form of a factor in terms of like form and stuff like that about how teams getting wins off the buys. But it's going to be a hard one to try to distinguish. I mean, as a Knights fan, I think if the Knights would just play like they've been playing for the last month or so, they should be all right and they should be able to get the win. But the Bulldogs are a team that can throw a spanner in the works about how they do. So now we're going to move on just quickly as I'm putting these results in. I'm just going to move my face over here. So these are the results that I have sort of put in. I've got to say like Knights by 18, Storm by 12, Roosters by 12, Warriors by 30, Souths by 18, Broncos by 24, Sharks by 8, and Panthers by 24. And so we can now just move this back. And this is how I feel the ladder will be after this round. Obviously, the Cowboys still need to be added to their points. I believe, have their points been added? They have. Okay. So Broncos will actually... Oh, hang on, wait, what? No, that can't be. Broncos have got the game. Yeah, there's no way Broncos would be top. The Penrith will be second. The Panthers will be first, Brisbane second. Storm will go to fifth. Sharks will come up to fifth, and the Raiders will drop down to sixth. Knights will get to seventh, but with South Sydney and the Cowboys right on their tail, which sets up the Knights and Rabbitohs next week, which is going to be an absolute monstrous match. So Roosters jumping up to 11th to keep their season line. The Seagulls going down to 12th, which is going to put them in a tough situation. And, that's how I kind of see how the ladder goes off. So, yeah, a bit of an interesting stream. So that is how my predictions will go. What do you guys have? Let me know in the comments below. So thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all later. Goodbye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.